Hello and welcome to the Celtic State of Mind Monday Bulletin. It's been a week now since Brendan Rodgers joined Celtic officially. We knew it was going to happen for a couple of days, but it's been a week now. We're all waiting to hear what his first words would be as Celtic manager. We got an exclusive interview, I think it was Thursday night, and then we actually heard the words from his mouth himself at the media conference on Friday. I was lucky enough to represent a Celtic State of Mind at the fan media conference on Friday. It was an interesting day. He spoke to the mainstream media first, then there was some opportunities for some pictures pitch side, and then he came in to speak to the fan media, and we got to hear a few things from, I think it was in the mainstream media conference he mentioned this. He said he guaranteed, was the key word, that he would stay here for 3 years, Kevin, unless he gets emptied, of course. That was his saying. Do you believe him when he says that? It's strong wording. It's quite brave from Brendan
Oh,
Rodgers, considering where some fans still view him.
I wondered where I was emotionally when I said it, because even when we spoke about it last Monday, I didn't think it was real. I just felt like the Celtic website had just put up some graphics and like it just didn't feel real. And to actually see him walking, I was on my way to Dunfermline to watch St Pauli on Friday night, so I was in a pub when the press conference actually started, and it was on Sky Sports, and everybody hushed to actually listen to him, and I couldn't do it. I'm not there yet. I'm actually not there to listen to the nonsense that he's going to come out with. And it is nonsense. Well, but aye, it's no nonsense, right? He didn't come out with nonsense, which is good. Because I did actually on Saturday, I did actually read what he says. I still haven't watched the conference or any of that back, But there was one of the supporters club, one of the lads that goes up in the bus with us came in, and he says, he just says that he'll guarantee to stay for 3 years. I went and he says, right off the back yet, that's probably unless Saudi Arabia come in for him. You're like, that's probably quite true. And I think the period that we're in, like talking to the guys on Friday night, and I think they've kind of on the same sort of journey as me, at the moment, we're just a bit, I think they've been completely burned by Ange Postecoglou, and we're no willing to jump into anything whatsoever. And where I am as a fan is the 3 year thing stupid. You shouldn't have said that because that's daft. I was glad we didn't get an apology. I was glad that he actually stuck by that he thought was the right decision at that right time. I thought that. But look can change in 3 years, especially in football. Look inside in 3 minutes. I don't care whether I'll still be here in 3 minutes, never mind 3 years, with the way my internet has been gone today. But that's just how it is, And he says that, I mean, there was a rumour yesterday that Davy Moyes is getting offered like £100 million to actually go to Saudi Arabia. You just can't say that you'll only leave Celtic if you're going to get emptied. And I think being a Celtic fan and what's actually happened over the last 6 months, and if you don't go back to Brendan the first time as well, I think it was one of the things that if you take football far too seriously, then you would be no laughing at it. And I think we were having a wee bit of a chuckle at that, And he's probably regret. I don't know if he's regretted saying it, But I didn't believe a word. And that's no saying that I didn't trust Brendan or anything like that. I just know I'm old enough and ugly enough to know the way that football works. And 3 year is a long, long time in football. I just want to see what he does as a Celtic manager now. I'm not. He can say what he wants about European football. He can say that he's a better coach now, doing that since he's came back up for Leicester. I'm sure he maybe is. As I says with Postecoglou, I'll judge what he actually does as Celtic manager this time around. I'm not going to judge on his performances at press conferences and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It was just when he came out and Peter Lawwell started talking, I went, I can't do this now. This is still too early for me to actually try and compute this. But as I say, I did actually read. It afterwards. And as we said last week, James, he's an utter professional. He played the conference well.
Yeah.
And everything that he says, you would probably expect somebody of his magnitude of dealing with the press and experience to actually deal with. And
Yeah.
what I read was no surprise. And I went, that's no surprise to me.
You find that a
Just
lot with managers that have previously managed in the Premier League. They're all so professional, so well media trained because if you think the press sort of up here is always trying to catch someone out, down in England it's sort of times tenfold because it's a global scale. You've got to watch what you're saying because it's global scrutiny, global eyes on you at all times. So Brendan, he's well trained and he's well worked for things like that. I don't think, apart from that guarantee comment, there was nothing sort of too bad that would scream out about you. You had briefly touched on it. We spoke on the show as well before how he would approach the topic of how he left the club, because it's the massive elephant in the room. No one wants to ask it, but someone has to. Someone's got to bring it up. We didn't think an apology would be needed. That seemed like the general consensus amongst the viewing audience and amongst ourselves. And he said he didn't regret leaving, but he regretted how he made the supporters feel. That was where the conference, sort of the tone of the conference took a bit of a shift. He'd gone from sort of being pretty assertive to a bit more solemn in his tone. Do you think that's an appropriate response? That was the best way he could have handled it? And do you think the fact that he regrets how he made the supporters feel, do you think to try and make it up to them, there's going to be an extra bit of fire to try and bring the club to some more success?
Look, he says it wasn't a mistake to leave the first time, which he was never going to admit, because like it or lump it, he went to Leicester and done a no bad job for 3 and a bit year until like he got emptied, to use his phrase, down there. So he can't say that it was a poor decision. He can't say it was a poor decision to move on career-wise or anything like that. I can say that he can regret the way that he made the support feel, and he says that. And does that count as an apology? Probably no. It isn't an apology. I mean, he didn't apologise for leaving. He didn't. I mean, he has his reasons for leaving, and he says that he felt sorry for the support. I think he's been pretty consistent whenever asked about Celtic and Leicester as well. He always says that he would come back. He's a Celtic man. Again, it's just, is it not? But we're at this kind of point where we're looking for stuff because we are sort of in the disbelieving stage of grief, I think. If you go through the 6 stages of grief, I think we're all kind of in the disbelieving stage. And that's what, when we met up with the guys on Friday, and that's what we were saying, we were like that. If we would have said when we walked out the cup final, we'd be standing here a week and a half, 2 weeks later, with watching Brendan Rodgers being unveiled as the Celtic manager, we'd have thought we were all on the moon. We'd have thought we had all been like in a different planet, So it'll be interesting to see when the players come back. Then you'll get the players back and you'll have the media team asking the players what's it like under Brendan, yada yada yada, this and that, and everybody's going to be looking for stuff. It's in there. I will get there eventually. But at the moment I'm just a bit right. I'm going to judge you when the actual real stuff starts. And I'm not even like pre-season friendlies or anything like that. No, when the real stuff starts, because the general feeling is, with everybody I spoke to, there's no honeymoon period. No, get in there, get the job done. There's no
that was the message he was getting across. There should be. He plans to play aggressive football. He plans to play attacking football, similar to what Andrew's playing before. And we'd mentioned it. I think it was myself, Patrick, and John that were talking about it. There should be no transition period because of the quality of manager Brendan is. And the fact he's been here before, there should not really any time for a settling in period. Jungle Line coming in here. Rodgers, like every other manager, only looks out for themselves. I think football is a very selfish sport. All sports are selfish anyway. It's the individual honours stand out at the highest level anyway. Then you are not a team, you are a player. Do you agree with that? You say football is a very sort of selfish sport.
It's a short career, so you've got to be selfish at certain points. It's not unless you go into coaching or anything like that. It's not a lifetime career. So unless you make an awful lot of money in the 10, 15 years that you've maybe got at the top, then when your stock's highest, you've got to actually take the jump. To maybe set yourself up for life, maybe try yourself in a better league, whatever your motivation or your ambition actually is. And it's the same for any player at any level. It doesn't matter if you're playing for Lithgow Rose and Auchinleck Talbot come in for you and offer you an under the table £500 a week or something like that. But not that happens in junior football for anybody. It's like or lowland league football and clubs and anything like that. But it's a selfish. Being a sportsman is selfish to a certain point, and eventually it does come down to you and you only. But it's the same way anything in life. There is a point where you do become selfish because, and whether it's for your family, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for your own mental health, whether it's for your own health, you do make a decision based on yourself. I think the actual difference is with sport is you've got millions of folk invested as you as a person who you believe should be thinking the exact same way as you.
Yeah, there's certain points in your career where the big decisions come as well. I'm going to go into it a bit later because we've got a certain Kyogo Furuhashi who had a big decision to make this summer, which I'm going to touch on a bit later in the show when we get to a transfer-centred discussion, which we're always going to find. The Acsom viewers are probably tired of me talking about Europe, but you can tell from how much I'm emphasising it, how important it is to the Celtic fans. That was a question I posed to Brendan Rodgers on Friday. I asked him about it at the presser. He said we need more power for the Champions League if progress is going to be made. Fans have been echoing that sentiment for years now. We've not really had... Well, the last time Celtic got out of a Champions League group stage, you had Victor Wanyama in front of the defence, acting in that sort of role. And we've not really had a similar player to him since then, which has seen lots of failures in Europe. Do you think you need a similar player to a Wanyama, a bit more of a mean streak in the midfield for Celtic if they are going to really compete at the highest level?
If I remember correctly, he also had an Effie Ambrose and a Kelvin Wilson and an Adam Matthews and a Miku in that Celtic squad that got out the Champions League. At this point last year, you can all go back and watch. I thought we needed a big, tall, athletic defensive midfielder, and that hasn't changed. Awata might be that, but he's no tall and he lacks the physical attributes that you see with other teams in Europe.
I think he's got strength, so he could play that role. Whenever we need to close out a game, he's always the man that's brought on to do so when our back's going to be against the wall, which in Europe, 9 times out of 10, our backs are going to be against the wall. So he could be the man to partner McGregor.
He could. I wouldn't write him off. He could be that. He could have... Rodgers has watched Celtic quite a lot. He's admitted that he's watched
every
Celtic
game. He said every single game.
Probably more than me.
Every single game when he's managing a 3 p.m. kickoff and Celtic are playing a 3 p.m. kickoff. But I'll let Brendan off for it. I wouldn't look into it too much.
Aye. Well, let's not poke holes in the PR spin. He'll know. And he's had long conversations with Callum McGregor and John Kennedy as well. So Kennedy, he's probably got all the facts and figures and stats and that about the midfield players there. So he'll know the strengths and weaknesses of Iwata. And if we need another midfielder, that's where he'll go. And if he already says that we need more physicality, then you could probably expect to see that coming in. Again, the game's a bit more athletic. He's came from one of the most athletic leagues in the world, where you look at that West Ham team that won the European Conference League. They are a giant side, a big athletic side. Nobody that watched that Conference League final could have any argument that Fiorentina were the better technical football team. But West Ham still got the job done because of their athleticism and their ability not to lose goals and how to stay in the game. And it'll be... These guys cost money, and these guys are usually English-based. And it's quite interesting that we're still getting linked to, like, what we would call, not obscure markets, but in European terms, they are obscure, far-flung markets. I think us as a Celtic supporter are past that snobbery now. That we know that there is gems to be behold in that league in Asia and round about that. So we didn't raise eyebrows anymore when we're getting linked with these players, because we know these players can actually come in and develop. And again, we need to develop European class players. I've got no worries for somebody coming for... I've heard enough of the guys for Celtic Down Under to talk about an Australian guy coming in who's standing out in the A-League. I've got no qualms that he'll actually play well in Scotland. I've got no qualms because the Scottish League's rank.
You could even say that. I know it's a friendly, but when we done the tour over in Australia back in December, I think it was Melbourne City that beat us. They didn't look half bad. They were really taking the game to us.
There were. Obviously, there are circumstances to that we were just off a flight, this and that. But on that one viewing, and we have to caveat that quite big style, on that one viewing, you would say there's no chance you're getting relegated for the Scottish Premier League. And it's the same. It was the same when we're playing teams in the preliminary rounds of Europe and that. Everybody's saying, you shouldn't get beat for Copenhagen, but you're going like that. Copenhagen will finish third in our league quite comfortably. They might even finish second quite comfortably.
I think their TV deals, they get more money than us as well. Like, a lot more money than us.
They get a lot more money, James, but they haven't got they've got their budget is not as big as Celtic and Rangers. So again, I think it's
more money for players, though. I think if you're looking at a Premier League team, they'd be more likely to pay 30 million for a player from Copenhagen than they would be to pay 30 million for a player for Celtic. There's still that hesitancy for teams to pay that sort of money for players from Celtic just because of the league we play in.
It's the Scottish tax, ain't it? I mean, every tax usually adds things on. The Scottish tax takes things off with players coming for the Scottish League. I mean, I remember, go back to Rodgers, when he was talking about Virgil van Dijk. And he went, I says, Van Dijk could have went for Celtic to Liverpool directly, but nobody would take that chance because he needed that 2 year at Southampton, so they could judge him at that level. And I completely understand that, because if you're playing against a jobber for Ross County, then you're going to play against some of the top athletes and football players in the world. You're not going to spend 30-40 million pound. If it gone, no, you need to prove yourself in this league first.
Point on Friday that Celtic need to try and figure out a way to get the middleman out of these transfer deals where we can be the team that sells a player at these bigger clubs. And the only way to do that is build upon the success that we're doing now at the moment. The club, we are in a healthy position. Do you think this, if you were to look at the squad, what sort of state would you say it's in the now? Would you say it's in a good position? I feel like when we're looking at positions to improve, we really are nitpicking, which probably says a lot about the state of the team.
Well, you talk about cut, but I'll just go back. You talk about cut out the middleman. No, you make the middleman work for us, because we made more money when Van Dijk went from Southampton to Liverpool than what we did originally. So if you make the middleman work for you, then it can work. Where are we? Squad terms. Fine domestically. We are miles off it in Europe. I'm fed up hearing this way. We done played well for 65 minutes against Real Madrid. We got tonked 3-0. That's like, it's Real Madrid, I know, right? I'm no. We were a Mudryk away from probably finishing in that Europa League third in that spot, right? But I'm still, we would never get £50 million for a player. So that's the difference when it comes to that. Every position is up for grabs in Europe. Every single position is up for grabs in Europe. And that should be the way, if the football club is actually serious about doing anything in Europe, that should be the way they're actually looking at, that every position can be upgraded. It's not affordable to upgrade every position, and you might not be able to upgrade every position that you want to upgrade, but there will be areas where you can actually make improvements for guys. But again, we talk about Scottish tax. You've got that problem of trying to get players to come to Scotland, and this is where you look at the people that we're getting linked with the now. I know it's very, very early days, and in the transition between Ange Postecoglou and Brendan Rodgers. But you look at the players that we're being linked with. They're still development players. They're still players that we're going to need to develop into.
It's not the sort of players where just off the name value alone, you know, this guy's going to be a good player. You've got to go in and do your research on the player yourself, because Celtic aren't really in the position to do that. But I want to go back to the sort of state the team's in. the team, Brendan Rodgers, he said the team he walked into in 2016 had a lot of individual quality, but it didn't work as a cohesive unit. The team that he's walked into with now is a far better than the team that he walked into in the first place. It's a different proposition that Rodgers is facing, because usually when he goes to a team, it's a team that needs a bit of a kick up the arse, a bit of a rebuild, a bit of saving. And he's left. Do you think he's left a better team than Brendan left for Neil Lennon in the first place?
Yes, because if you believe the rumours that the majority of the team, by the time they got to the end of that season when Brendan left, wanted to leave. they wanted to go. They had done their time in Scottish football. They just won another treble, and winning 10 in a row didn't mean a thing to them, because they've gone, well, why do I want to hang about here? Next thing you can, there's a next thing you know, there's like the pandemic and that, and the majority of them are like, nah. So yeah. The majority of them would have wanted to end it. They wanted to probably leave. And if Celtic stuck to their guns, and this is where it's going to be interesting for me under Rodgers, you see the guys that are coming in, and they are sort of development. They are sort of young guys who are coming to the club and see it as a step up. But Rodgers actually says that was it Rodgers actually? Or did I read it? I think I maybe read it. You got to a point where Rodgers didn't follow the model, where guys like Boyata and Gordon should have been sold, because that's where we are at the model. And the reason that the model was failing was at that point, and the reason that the model was worked under Postecoglou is we bought a window in front. So if these guys were going to leave, you're already 6 months before you're going, well, that guy's coming in that window to replace that boy. It's leaving 6 months later.
There you are.
Aye, that's the way it's got to be, and that's the way this club's got to be run. And I found it quite wary. If nobody's listened to the Celtic Huddle podcast when they've got the Leicester guy on, that Rodgers seemed to make the same mistakes at Leicester that he done towards the end of his time here. But he made them towards the end of his time at Leicester as well, with a couple of bad signings and no following the Leicester model. When I looked at Leicester fans, says there was a couple of players there that should have been moved on. And this is where it comes back to the selfish nature of football. We're not going to get guys like Callum McGregor all the time. There is going to be guys that are here for 2 to 3 years. And when their talent is on the up, they're going to want to move. And Celtic have got to go to this point going, I would love to build a team round about you, but we can, it's not going to be possible. You just need to move on. And this is why you've probably got an 18-month to 2-year window to develop a player.
Yep.
That's it.
A year to settle in, a year at the best, then that's the peak time to sell. That's the peak sell time. When they're sort of in their best form, you've got to snap it then, because I'm going to go on to Odsonne Edouard here. He took a lot of stick in his final season at Celtic. His form didn't drop off too much, but it dropped off enough where his value could go down a bit. So you've got to really capitalise on that selling price, get as much money as you can. The recruitment approach, as you mentioned, it's changed from where Rodgers left the club in the first place. The work in the background has been going on since he left as well. He had a lot to say about Mark Lowell. He gave some really high praise to Mark Lowell. In fact, you think those two working hand in hand and carrying on the current recruitment model we're using, do you think that could be effective? Do you think Rodgers will want to stick to that model, or do you think he'll sort of try and do what he did at Leicester and maybe veer them away from it? Because we know he likes his statement signings. That's something that I've been echoing. I've been saying I think we'll break the transfer record this summer.
I think it'll be quite difficult to break the transfer record to get somebody at that value to come to Scotland. I've been on record saying that, but I do believe that there will be a statement. Every manager that comes into a club will buy a player that he wants. They'll have things set up in the background, but because this is not a rebuild, Rodgers is coming into a squad where he goes, I want this guy because he can play the way that I want to play, and he can actually improve that area of the team. From the players that are currently there, Callum McGregor's phone will be red hot, James's Forrest's phone will be red hot as well, and they'll be going like, they will improve you as a player. So these guys that are on that trajectory up the way will be going like, well, I'm going to hang about here. This guy, I've got two guys here that I trust that are telling me that he is going to improve me as a football player, and it's going to be great working under him. Then you've probably got these guys as well who go, that right, if I work under him for pre-season, have a decent European campaign, I'm prime pickings in January to go somewhere. Or this is, a lot of your guys will start getting noticed. I mean, they'll maybe get noticed during the summer. There maybe be some of them that are already talking, but maybe the younger ones and the guys who have just came into European football, like Hatate, maybe Matt O'Reilly. You ken what I mean? Even though I said, aye, these sort of guys going up to that level, there's probably a couple of clubs who go, you're on the radar, but maybe no, they know. There's maybe better options out there. And by the time you get to September, October, the scouting reports could be, by the way, these boys are. So we've got to be prepared for that. And we've got to maybe be prepared for that this summer.
I think that's something Brendan Rodgers gives us, that if you appointed an Enzo Maresca or a Farioli, Rodgers gives that factor of he's a known name, his reputation precedes him to what the other managers wouldn't. So he's able to keep players here who perhaps was, Ange's gone, we've got this guy's not up to Ange's quality. Now's my time, I've got to go, I'm not going to develop this guy. Whereas they know with Rodgers, it's proven quality. Michael Moran was wearing something we were speaking about just about earlier. If the players go for big fees, let them go. It's what's good for the club. And that matters, that the players and managers are transit. We talked about the Acsom model before, turning over players and building up money. I've spoken about that model on the podcast many, many times. The urban culture, we need to spend an absolute fortune on a goalkeeper, no mess, and go for it. Goalkeeper's the position I've been highlighted, although John Hughes raised an interesting point to me just during the week last week, that it's hard to find a goalkeeper who fits everything Celtic are looking for in Europe. If there's a goalkeeper who's good with the ball at his feet, and he's an amazing shot stopper, chances are a big team's got him already. Or if not, a big team's looking at them. So I think a goalkeeper, it's going to be hard to find. You need to spend a pretty penny. But if Celtic, they want to push on you, I think that's something they should be doing. You touched on Cal McGregor. Rodgers, he admitted in his press conference that he tried to bring Cal McGregor to Leicester with him. Do you think McGregor will continue to thrive under Rodgers? Because it was Rodgers that developed him into the player he is now in the first place. Rodgers wanted to continue that development. He clearly saw a higher ceiling for McGregor in Scottish football and wanted to take him to the Premier League, to make him one of the centre points of that Leicester midfield. So do you think having McGregor as the captain, as a familiar face as well, will be good for Rodgers? And the fact that McGregor took that trip to Mallorca in the first place to speak to Brendan, it shows not just the connection they have, but the connection McGregor has to the football club. There should be no worries about McGregor going anywhere. And I think that's probably the same thing he would have told Rodgers. How do you think McGregor works under Rodgers? I think he'll be a very key figure for him, not just on the park, but behind the scenes as well in the early days.
He'll be the same key figure that he was for Ange Postecoglou when he comes in. It's in his nature. We talk about players being utterly selfish, and Callum McGregor turned 30 last week or the week before.
Yeah, sometime this year.
So he is like dedicated to the football club, and he knows he'll put the football club first before everything new because of what he's been through. He's at a different stage of his career at the guys at 23, 24, 25. He's now 30. He's quite settled up here. He'll love Rodgers coming back again because he'll be at the first in training. I mean, Scott Brown says that about him as well. He was always the first in training. He was just behind me, blah, blah, blah. And that will only change, and Callum will only change, and he will just be that same important figure that he was to Ange Postecoglou. And any player that will come into the club as well, Callum's going to be really important. I mean, you look at that. I mean, it's quite funny when you hear Rodgers saying that. It's like, I could have took Callum down, but he just signed a new deal and it wasn't going to happen. You also wanted John Kennedy to go down to England, go down to England with him, and Kennedy refused. McGregor, I think we've got a dressing room of club captains, but I think McGregor kind of stands out technically wise, ability wise. He must be a great player to coach, when you look at the job that he does for Scotland, completely different for the job that he does for Celtic, but he can do that role just as well, and he is a leader on that park as well, with a amount of bigger names round about him, like your Robertsons and your Tierneys and McTominay and guys like that. He just goes there and quietly, effectively does his job. I mean, for an outsider looking in, it looks like he would have no problems managing them at all. He comes in there, does his work, then helps the team. He sees it as an absolute team game, and I can't believe that when Brownie, let's call him Brownie since Brendan's back. Since Brownie left, we were sitting here questioning Cal McGregor's mettle to be.
It was because the tail end of that season, they're not saying in an interview where we don't really know what we're doing on the park. I think that was when Neil Lennon was still manager. We'd just dropped points. I think it was a home game. He said, we don't really know what we're doing on the park. So there might have been some questions, but you've seen in the last sort of few years on the park, he's the leader. He's the guy that will put in the big tackle when it's needed. He's the guy that will...
I'm glad they didn't ken what they were doing on their part, because we didn't ken what they were doing on the park for about 6 months of that season.
I think even with the work he does off the pitch as well, you didn't think you could get another Scott Brown, but Cal McGregor is so close to what he does, the work he does off the park as well. If he's needed to promote a charity event or to promote a foundation event, he's always there and he's always willing to do it, and he's always willing to speak to everybody. He's just a great representative for the club to have in the first place. We've reached the half-hour point. I'm going to switch away from Rodgers' press conference. I'm going to get more towards the fun stuff of this sort of time of year. There's no football, but you've got transfers to worry about. There's quite a few things to cover. The weekend saw lots of rumours flying round. The first one is Stephen Welsh, a sort of forgotten man. He's getting interest from Italy. Again, I think it was Udinese that had a bit of interest in him a few years ago. It's Hellas Verona and Bologna that have come in from now. I think this could be the time for him to leave. You know, he'll have his own ambitions, much like David Turnbull I was mentioning last week. He was the captain of Scotland under 21s. No doubt he'll be wanting to get into the Scottish national team. He's a good player to have as an option at Celtic, but if it's going to be limiting Welsh's development or it's going to be limiting his career, then it could be the time to move on. I think a move to Italy could be the place for him to thrive. We've seen players of a similar age and similar positions from Scotland go over to Italy and succeed. Aaron Hickey, Josh Doig, two defenders that have gone over in recent years and saw some great success. Do you think, for the sake of his career, a move away is needed? Do you think there's still a role to play at Celtic? He is a Celtic fan. He could just be one of those players who's content with just being at Celtic. Or do you think he'll have a bit more ambition than that?
Hope he's selfish. Go free my young prince and go and sample Italy. On you go. Go and develop as a football player. You've had the dream. You've scored goals for Celtic. You've won competitions with Celtic. There's too many bodies in front of you now. Go to Italy. Have a look at the guys that you played with at Scottish youth team level, what they've done. Go and learn Italian. Go and experience a different culture. Go and eat decent pizza, no Domino's rubbish. Go and do it. Just go and do it. For the good of himself, go and do it. And that's me no commenting on him as a player, but just where he is in his life and his career, as we're talking about his time. The time has come for him to move on. And I mean, he could come back in the summer and have an absolute belter.
I think he has the qualities to succeed in the modern game. He's exactly what you'd want in a modern centre back. He's good in the air. He's good with the ball at his feet. It's exactly what these teams who are playing that progressive sort of football would be looking for. And we know the defenders Italy's produced, the defenders Italy's made, there's no better place to develop as a defender than going over to Italy. So perhaps Stephen Welsh, I think he's only got a year left on his deal now. Because it really is a make-or-break situation for him. It's
a numbers game now for him. I mean, in the background, the club will know if they're looking to bring in another centre-half. In the background, the club will know if that's one of the positions that they're going to look at. It is an important... There is an important position, and Plunge completely agree with that. 3 million for Welsh.
I think that's a bit too much. I think Welsh with a year left on his deal, you're looking at about...
He's got a year left on his deal. He can't mess about here too much. He's going to be pretty much guaranteed first-team football. And if you've got an offer for Italy,
a top 5
go,
league as well.
A top 5 league, got an offer to Italy, go, or either that he's looking about jobbing about St Mirren or St Johnson or something like that. Get yourself to Italy, pal. On you go. On you go.
It's a big chance.
You go with my utter blessing, but I'm sure that you're not bothered that you're going with my blessing or not.
I'd love him to stick around. I'd love him to develop at Celtic.
There's
but
no point I'm sticking about,
James. Best of his career, it's probably best to move on. Since you were last on the show, we had some comments from Kyogo Furuhashi, which caused a bit of meltdown, just from myself. His comments to the media following Japan's win over Peru. He said he would take his time over the summer to think about things. And conveniently following this, over the weekends, we had reports of £16 million offers from Spurs and Burnley. Do you think he'll leave this summer? We know Angie likes to take players with him. Do you think you could replace Kyogo as well? Is he replaceable? How much money would it take for you to part ways with him? And if he was to go, what sort of mould of a striker are you looking for to replace him?
It's interesting. I say that very, very often, but when I was reading back about the press conference that Rodgers compared them to Suarez, and again, I'm going to go back to the huddle breakdown where what Rodgers done with Vardy, he told Vardy just to stay within the box, and obviously Vardy's an older type player and no to press, so out to the wings and all of that. And I'm going, that's interesting because he's got Kyogo there who's plays on the shoulder like Vardy, so that could work for him. Again, it's up to Kyogo, and if we get a bid and is acceptable to the club, then he'll need to go and talk to that team. Is £16 million acceptable for Kyogo? Yes.
So I didn't realise I was muted there. I'd be thinking maybe closer to 20 million. I don't know if that's us just sort of trying to aim high anyway with the valuation, considering how important it is to the club. But when you think about the factors we discussed earlier, teams in England, how they don't really like to trust the Scottish League, where you would perhaps look, how's he done in Europe then? You look at the Champions League, things might not have been too convincing, but when you consider his injury record, that would sort of explain it. And I thought in the Europa League in the first season, where he was on that red-hot run of form, I thought he impressed. I think with a second bite at Europe, he could do that. Do you think Kyogo, he would have the ambition to go to England and try and succeed? Because it's a big decision he's got to make. I think at this sort of age, he could be seeing the prospect of just becoming a legend at Celtic, the same way guys like Nakamura were. Do you think that could be playing in his mind?
It could be playing in his mind. He came to Scottish football quite late. He did do that. Again, it's all down to if you're getting £16 million for a guy who've had 2 decent seasons out of it, it's probably the right time to go. If somebody comes in and offers you like that sort of money. And he's 28, 29. So if somebody's offering you £16 million for Kyogo, then you take it. You actually do. And I'm not being funny about that. And we go and sign a striker. It's hopefully an upgrade. It's maybe a bit more physical because Rodgers does like a bit more a physical player. But I'm sure that Kyogo would fit into a Rodgers team. What I actually believe is this, and this may be wrong, and this maybe shows my lack of knowledge of complete and utter football, that and Tottenham Hotspur will not be looking at Kyogo. They will be looking
They've got to replace Harry Kane. They'll be looking sort of higher than Celtic. They'll be looking at these top 5 leagues, things like that. Pat Cadigan coming here, 16 million is fine. Players and managers, with few exceptions, are employees. At 28, he probably won't command a higher fee. Here's our proposal for you, Kevin. If you were to sell Kyogo for 16 million, then use most of that money to pay the astronomical wages of Moussa Dembele to bring him back, would you do it?
No. Look, No, let's not go back. No, that's. I mean, it's took me long enough. It's took me long enough to accept Brendan Rodgers coming back, and I haven't really accepted Brendan Rodgers coming back yet. But I will, and I will be fully behind him by the time the season starts. But again, we've got the Scottish tax, we've got this, we've got a guy who's 28 coming up 29. We've got a boy who's moved late into Scottish football, European football. So 16 million for me is a decent deal.
Yeah, Brendan Rodgers.
But I do believe that they two clubs will be looking at a level above Kyogo.
Yeah, Brendan Rodgers says he's put in the same boat as you. He's not worried about a potential Spurs raid, as the tagline says. He said top players, they naturally attract attention, and we've got a lot of players that are in very good form at the moment. Do you think Brendan's right? Do you think it would be more of a selling summer this summer for Celtic rather than a sort of building on what you've got? Because in an ideal scenario, you would have no interest in our top players and we could just keep building and building and building. But there's teams that are looking to do the exact same in the transfer market. It's always a very busy window. We're going to have players like Matt O'Reilly, like Kyogo, like Jota Hatati, who are going to be attracting interest. Do you think it's going to be more of a sell and replace sort of summer for Celtic?
It's very early days yet, and because it's a later start to the season, and let's have a look. If you're a successful football club and you develop good football players, people will come in and buy your football players for bigger leagues, and we sell this to these guys. That see if you do well here, you're likely to get a move to a bigger and better league. You might not find a better place to play football, but you might get a move. You might get that move to a bigger, better league. And there is times where you've got to weigh everything up. I mean, is it a right time if somebody came in with money for O'Reilly, for Hatati, and we're looking to upgrade in that midfield anyway, and you're going, we could maybe defoot them and take that money and like recycle it and reuse it. I mean, we could do that. Again, it just depends on the interest, depends on the market. The market looks a bit strange at this precise moment in time, with like Tonali going to Newcastle for 50 million.
Yes, the teams you would usually expect to be the big spenders are a bit strapped for cash. The likes of your Manchester Uniteds and your Liverpools don't really have the money they normally would have to spend, whereas you've got newer teams that have got this new incredible amount of money, the likes of the Saudi League or the likes of Newcastle, these teams that didn't really have that wealth before, all of a sudden have the cash to get a Kante or a Tonali or players like that. But Rodgers, he said he was in the same boat as you, obviously. He doesn't think Spurs would be going in for a player like Kyogo to replace Harry Kane. Do you think that anybody else in our team that he could come after? Because I always call back to he raided Yokohama after he left them. He did wait until the January, but he got Maeda and then he got Iwata. Would you say there's a possibility of that, or do you think it's just sort of lazy rumours? It's a manager leaves, he's going to go and get these players from his former club. I think it's just a case of that.
I think at the moment it's just a case of that. At the moment,
because you're seeing it with Rodgers as well. He's getting linked with old Leicester players. It's sort of just a natural cycle, you would think.
It's a natural cycle, and when you get to this point of the year, you've got players away on holiday. You've got guys away on holiday. You've got folk needing to actually fill up column inches and all that. Look, they could be interest. I mean, we were quick enough to actually bat away the Tottenham Hotspur interest for your manager, and then that turned out to be quite true. So there could be interest. So you can't really rule it out, but you can't really bother about it until it actually happens. And until that actually happens, I've got no say if it actually happens or no. If the club get offered £16 million for Kyogo, or £16 million for Matt O'Reilly, or £3 million for Stephen Welsh, it'll be the football department that will make that decision. If they think it's a good deal and they can replace that player with better, they'll actually do it. So it's that is what's going to happen. And at the moment we are getting like a load of rumours, a load of links in that. I think we've had a couple of lazy ones with us, just ex-Leicester players.
Yeah,
And I think,
Amarte, Ndidi, likes of
and
those.
that was it. The Brazilian winger was at Shakhtar on loan, which
Or
he's no.
Tete.
Aye, him as well. I think there's been a couple of lazy ones, and the ones that we've actually seen coming to us have been quite left field, and that may continue. Whether that's good enough or not, it's soon. We'll soon know, eh? But this is how like we get like through the pre-season, eh? This is how the media gets through the pre-season. This is how Sky Sports get through the pre-season. James, I remember a time where we used to buy papers, and when you were buying papers, football wouldn't be even on the back page now. You wouldn't even ken Celtic had a pre-season friendly until you got a wee bit down the bottom saying we had got beat off Forest Mechanics. A Celtic 11 had got beat off Forest Mechanics 3-0. And you hardly had any transfer rumours. And like the only time that you got a story on the back page is if you actually like sign somebody. Eh? So we're at overload. Again, it's great for you young guys and all of that,
Yeah.
But
Rumour Mill's great for Acsom as well, giving us daily content for the Daily Bulletin.
it is.
Well,
But
long
I'm going to be the cynical old man here, and I'll deal with it when it actually happens.
may the rumour mill keep spinning, as far as I'm concerned. Chaz Vac weighed in here. Kyogo's scored goals in Europe. Was a bit unlucky in the Champions League last season. He'll do well in the Premier League. No danger.
I'm,
I'd agree with
I'm,
that. I thought he was very unlucky.
I'm not disagreeing with that as well, Chaz. I'm not disagreeing with it. I just think there's a snobbery view of our players, and they'll be looking at guys coming for top 5 leagues, not coming for Scotland. Burnley are not going to put all their shekels that they've got for gone up in a basket on the top goal scorer of the Scottish Premier League, keeping them in the English Premier League next year.
Vincent Kompany's adopted sort of a different signing policy with them. He signed a lot of more obscure players when they were in the Championship, as opposed to the sort of usual journeyman you would get floating around there as strikers. If you remember Daryl Murphy, for example, he always had a team to go to, but he would score about 20 goals. But Kompany adopted a different sort of signing philosophy, a bit like what we had, getting a bit more obscure players, not the usual suspects, and then they sort of blew the league out the water. So Kyogo could potentially be a player for him, I think. But I want to get away from players leaving, that sort of terrible thought of the likes of Kyogo and Jota leaving the club. And I want to move to players coming in.
That's how we're conditioned now, James. We're conditioned to talk about this. We're the board's wet dream, because we speak about this all the time, and it doesn't matter how often you actually go through your head, go and stop talking about players leaving, go and stop talking about players leaving. We've had 2 decades of players leaving. Like, we've developed them and they leave. So that's the way it is, and that's how we actually speak about it, because we always know it's folk have great games, and next thing you can go, oh, it won't be long until he's away.
Yeah, I want to go to the first player we've been linked, the one that seems like some of the stronger links. We've apparently agreed a fee for Australian forward Marco Tilio from Melbourne City, 21 years old. Looks like the City Group connections are helping us out there. Melbourne City, of course, falling under the umbrella of the City Football Group. Another forward potentially coming in. He was at the World Cup last season, 10 goals and 5 assists from the winger. Some decent numbers, perhaps a similar mould to Leo Abada there. I saw a very good scout report on Twitter. I think it was from Aussie Scout. If you were able to get a hands on that, be sure to give that one a read. But he played mostly as a left winger, but he's apparently been more effective as a number 10, who was sort of producing goals and assists wise. A 10's been a position that's been spoke about quite a bit. Would we need to sign one? Could we move on our player out of position into that number 10 role? Do you think that's a position Celtic should really be looking at? Does bolstering the attack excite you a bit?
Oh, it's always exciting buying attacking players, eh? That's always the big box office ones, attacking players. A left winger, who do we currently play there just now? Jota, sometimes Maeda. didn't care if he'd be an upgrade on any of the two because I haven't really seen any of them. Do I think that he can come in and play domestically? Of course I can. I do think that. He's 21 at a City Group team, so you've got to say that these guys are not.
Oh, Kevin's turned to a black screen. But I'll stay on Marco Tilio there. He's could be filling in at that number 10 role, which when you consider the fact that we've already thought about Sead Haksabanovic potentially playing there, we've already thought about the fact maybe David Turnbull could move into that position. There's some real interesting prospects as to what we could do with it. Another player we've been linked with, in fact, from Five's been nuked from Stevie Boy. We're pursuing Yang Hyun Jun from Gangwon FC. They seems to have sparked a real battle between the club and the players' representatives. Gangwon, they want the player loaned back immediately if they sell them to us, which it could be an interesting prospect. If we try and sell this guy back on loan to them, it's not really what they'd be wanting. They'd be wanting immediate impact. So he said in the South Korean media today, actually, I want to go to Celtic. I want to go in the summer. So I'm not too sure if that's what you want to see from a player. You could look at sort of both sides of the coin. Either the player is desperate to go to Celtic, he really wants to go to Celtic and he's going to play his heart out for us, which could be one way of looking at it. But the other side of the coin is this player's kind of starting a bit of uproar just to get his way out of the club. Which, do you really want that? What if he comes to Celtic, he does the exact same? I've had problems with players forcing moves away from the club in the first place. So it could be something to look out for, but it's a smart signing, some positive signs with the recruitment. We're staying in the Asian market, which is something that us on the show and yourselves in the comment section. I want to get a bit more interactive with you guys. Get some questions coming in just while we wait and see if Kevin will arrive very, very soon. Something I want to get your opinion on, guys, actually. It's a bit of a controversial topic. The Rangers CEO, James Bisgrove, has said it's unlikely Celtic will ever get the full allocation at the Broome loan end. Both teams didn't have travelling fans for the last two derby games. Kevin is back. Whilst I've tried to burn through the last of my notes, and as Urban Culture mentioned, nervously glancing at the clock, Kevin is coming to save us at the final hour. I'll get back to the transfer links then before I got down the controversial path of the allocation at Ibrox. We'll get to that at the end, but before that, I was just speaking about Yang Hyun Jun from Gangwon FC. The team are in a relegation battle. If they're going to sell the player to us, they want him loaned back there immediately, straight away. So if he wants to leave, he wants to leave. The representatives were annoyed and they blasted the board for giving them false promises of a move to Europe. They said in South Korean media, I think it was this morning or last night, I want to go to Celtic. I want to go this summer. That's verbatim from the horse's mouth. He would add an option at right wing, a position which we could use more options.
We could use more options. I mean, like, I think they're second bottom in the South Korean league. I think they are. Again, it's another young lad. It's another development thing that is going to come in. We've seen guys come for that league. Well, we've only seen one boy come for that league, which is O, and he can handle Scottish football all right as well. So again, I would have no worries about the guy stepping up. The same as I wouldn't have any the Australian boy Tilio stepping up as well. I've got no hangway for that. It just seems quite weird that it's no weird, but we're in this market and it seems to be quite lazy. And again, this boy might have just been saying that like, I want to go to Europe, I want to go to Celtic. My agents tell me Celtic are interested. And it could just be a bit of noise trying to generate interest for the guy. But what were we? Have we actually? Were we linked with this guy before Postecoglou left?
I think this is the first time the links have been there. He was annoyed because he'd been linked with a move to Minnesota United over in America. he wanted a move out of Korea. That was certain. Europe was his aim. So then we started to get interested in him. We put an offer in. The player wanted to take the deal. Apparently, his club had promised him a move to Europe because that was what he wanted at the end of the day, and now his club have rejected it, and now he's sort of causing a bit of an uproar. Do you think, would you say that's quite worrying when you look at a player if they're causing an uproar to get to the club? Because I was mentioning whilst you were trying to fix whatever had happened, there's two sides of the coin. You can look at that. It's either a player forcing himself to the club, he's desperate to play for the club, or on the other side of the coin, it's a player who, if he wants to leave you and if he's unhappy, it will cause absolute hell and it will cause an uproar to get out of the club. How would you look at that? Which side of the coin would you sort of look at?
I think at some point all these guys like chuck it, if you can what I mean. Now I didn't chuck it there, James. I actually did forget to plug in my laptop and I ran out of battery. That's what
Is that what happened?
That's what happened. So maybe I'm just phoning it in. maybe I want a transfer to the 20-minute Tims or something like that. Maybe I'm just stamping my feet and causing eruptions in the changing rooms. Or no, where did I want to go? It was heart on hand last week. I said I was going to go to Brendan Rodgers became Celtic manager again. It's you don't know the circumstances there. You didn't ken the noises there. You didn't want a bad egg in the dressing room. It does that. But
anytime the bad eggs were there, they got booted out the door. Juranovic's agent was doing all the talking, and then in the nick of time he was gone. Giacomakis, another one, he wanted to leave the club, and then put on the bench. You're not really getting a chance. Then off you pop. You look
at Giacomakis as well. It was kind of case. Well, if you're not signing a new deal, which seems to take out this clause, then you're gone on the first available opportunity, and it could be the same with this guy. Again, a lot it's just talk at this precise moment in time, and it's going to develop over the next couple of weeks. These conversations will be getting had, but is like bringing in two wingers. It's almost as if now we sign wingers and front players like we used to sign midfielders under Gordon Strachan. We used to just be like a Animal Farm for a.
I think we signed loads of wingers under Neil Lennon as well. I just remember having loads of wingers. I needed fullbacks or I needed a defender or something. It was always just get another winger. Why not?
Aye. Swed, here he comes. We'll just bring him, Lewis Morgan, Wakaso. Who was that?
Did Wakaso score a cracker against? Was it Salzburg away?
It was, yes. It was. He did score a cracker. Ivan Tonev as well was another winger.
Alexander Tonev.
Alexander Tonev. Ivan Tonev. Maybe I'm getting mixed up there. It could be lazy journalism. Who knows? Until we start getting until Stephen McGowan says something, I didn't usually believe it. But
that was McGowan that spoke about the Stephen Welsh rumours, so there could be something concrete that. We've got 2 minutes to go, and my final topic I want to cover could be a half an hour topic, but we'll get some sort of quick fire opinions on it here at the end. Rangers CEO James Bisgrove has said it's unlikely Celtic will ever get the full allocation at the Broom loan end. Both teams didn't have travelling fans for the last two derby games in the league. Do you think it could be fixed next season? Do you think there's any compromise? Because the way I look at it, neither clubs would want to really do any sort of dealings with each other. I don't really know if there could ever be a return to the full allocation, but the fact you've got a CEO of one of the parties involved in this sort of disagreement saying it's never going to happen, it's not really a good sign, is it?
It's not really a good sign. But it's not really a good sign. I actually drove past Ibrox last night. I went to see the Arctic Monkeys in Bella Houston Park, and I was parked down Edmondson Drive, so I had to actually drive past the place that I call the S Pit. And look, we're never going to get our full allocation back because they are fanning. They are bowing down to the lunatic fringe within their support, and they will never get the full allocation back. They've killed the greatest derby in world football, and it's all because we were absolutely scalping them, and they chucked the rattle out the pram, and their lunatic fringe couldn't actually handle it.
So the man that started the sort of domino effect of the allocation consistently getting cut and cut and cut is back, and it seems like he's got more trophies on his mind, perhaps even a treble on his mind for next season. But one thing's for sure is it's going to be a successful period for Celtic over the next few years. But we've got a lot to look forward to with Brendan Rodgers as Celtic manager. Just before we go, thank you to the just under 900 people who have been sort of following us and tuning in this entire hour. Thank you guys for sticking around, and everybody who's been sticking around the last few weeks. You've been getting involved in the comments and making my time as a presenter a lot easier. There's just 12 tickets left for the Gordon Strachan night at the Barras Art and Design on June 30th, this Friday. A lot of talk has been about Europe and making progress recently. Why not come and see a manager that has been successful with Celtic in Europe speak in front of a live audience? You can come and see Gordon Strachan. You can find the link for tickets in the description below. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Kevin Graham, for joining me on this Monday.